a Russian official who is tasked with mobilizing forces for Ukraine has revealed on his blog that North Korea is ready to send 50,000 specialized forces to Ukraine and is ready to send a total of 500,000 troops. Now, that would, of course, change the whole conflict and would shift everybody's perception of that war. Now, in the last 10, 20 years, we've gotten used to these sort of smaller wars that just fizzle out or then just get canceled at some point. But Ukraine could actually become much, much bigger. So Ukraine does not have enough soldiers to defend against such a communist horde, basically. And so that would mean maybe NATO countries would contemplate sending their own troops into Ukraine, but that would open up a whole nother can of worms. And maybe this would mean Ukraine would get conquered completely or almost completely, and they would have to make a really, really bad deal with Russia. Now, this news goes back to Alexander Sladkov, who is in a group that is supposed to find new troops for the war. And he blogged about 50,000 special forces and 500,000 troops in total from North Korea ready to deploy. Now, these soldiers could be put on trains and then shipped right through Russia to the front lines. This is entirely possible. There has been chatter about this sort of option in the past. People talked about a possibility of 100,000 troops, not 500,000 troops. And so it's interesting to see that this blurb, that this news was not really covered much in Western media. So you would have to find reports from German media or from some faraway countries. They actually covered it, but not American media, for example. So the only thing you read in American news was that North Korea may send some workers and that sort of thing. And there's a new push in North Korea to mobilize new soldiers. I mean, they have a pretty big army and they have a lot of people in reserves, and they do not really differentiate between a citizen and a soldier. It's interchangeable with them. And so you got those news, but not the latest blurb about 500,000 communist forces that may end up in Ukraine. And they can threaten Poland next, they can threaten the Baltics next, they could threaten Finland next, they could threaten Germany next. And that would change the whole game. Now, this Sladkov guy, this Russian dude, he's not allowed to leak any specific secrets. Apparently, he was allowed to put that out there. This, of course, can be used in secret negotiations about a possible end of this war. We may not see, actually, that troop contingent being moved, but it is there's an actual possibility. Now, North Korea has been involved, or had been involved in various wars, and most people actually don't know about this. So, North Koreans actually played a role in the Vietnam War against the United States. They played a role in several wars in the Near East, or the Middle East. And so you saw rocket artillery specialists from North Korea intervening on behalf of Iran and training Iranians and that sort of thing. And so artillery is really, really important for the North Koreans against South Korea, but it's also very important for the Russians in Ukraine. So you could put these North Koreans on trains and ship them right to the front line, and this would mean a lot of trouble for especially Poland, which borders Ukraine. Now, Poland has been ordering a lot of new tanks. There was like thousands of armored vehicles, and they're expanding their air force, they're expanding everything, and they want to increase their troop size up to 300,000, which is, of course, not enough to go against the North Koreans and maybe some other troops that are being moved in the near future. Now, of course, initially Russia only used 200,000 men for the initial attack against Ukraine, which is really not that much. If you think about it, it's common military logic that you want an overwhelming force. And it's also a very, very baseline concept to use a lot of Air Force operations in order to gain the air superiority. So within a few days or maybe a week, you want to control the entire airspace. But that did not happen. You barely saw any Air Force operations from the Russians. There's been, of course, talk that according to Russian intelligence, this would be an easy operation. Within 3 days, they wanted to have hold the capital and many other important areas. That, of course, didn't happen. And it was known to the Russians for quite a while that NATO countries trained Ukrainians in modern warfare, especially counter-tactics against these old Russian tactics that are based on older Soviet days, right? Also, these weapon systems used by Ukrainians, such as the HIMARS, for example, that's been around for 20 to 30 years. That's not exactly a secret. So why didn't the Russians take this into account? This is really, really strange. Even Stalin in World War II placed a lot of weight on reserve troops. So the attacking German forces, they did not know exactly how big these reserves were. So once the Germans were really tired and worn out, there came 1 million fresh troops ready to attack. And so this is something Russia nowadays would take into account. So they wouldn't actually go into such an adventure and place all the eggs in one basket, so to say, and take that great of a risk without having contingency plans. So contingency may be 500,000 North Korean troops. It may be small nuclear weapons are being deployed. There's all kinds of options. And then, of course, you have the big factor, China. Now, you've heard that China claims to be ready for an attack against Taiwan. And according to experts, it doesn't make much sense for China to just attack Taiwan. It's way too difficult to pull off, and the result would not really counterbalance the costs and the risks. So the only thing that makes sense for China is a bigger operation that involves North Korea and Russia. So these Eastern Bloc states, they may actually launch a coordinated operation. North Korea may bomb the United States military base in Guam. They may nuke a strike carrier group from the United States, thereby pushing the United States back to Australia. And that would give China the necessary space to take over Taiwan and cover some other goals that they have in the region, the South China Sea. And so China could claim that they're not responsible for North Koreans' actions, and Russia could use that opportunity to publicly align themselves with China and get new ammunition from China and get all these things that they need to continue the war. And then, of course, you may have lots of North Korean troops being deployed to Ukraine. So this could escalate fairly quickly and to a much, much larger scale. You have to be aware of that, and you have to be careful with these political, ideological opinions that are being tossed around in conventional media like television or even on the internet. So some people claim that Russia is conservative when it's really just a very basic empire run by former KGB guys, and Russia has probably for a long time been coordinating with China and North Korea. And so it is very important to protect Ukraine. It's very important to protect Poland and all of these European states. And higher ranking military guys, especially also Republicans, they have argued already. It is in America's interest to defend Ukraine, because if you wear out the Russians, this goes a long way in a possible much wider conflict. And Russia chose to attack Ukraine. And so the escalation, or possible escalation, is already there. The option is there. So just abandoning Ukraine isn't going to change anything. It's not going to de-escalate because if Ukraine is taken over, then the next steps of a greater plan may be launched, and then you'd have the same problem again, an attack against Poland, an attack against the Baltics, at a time when the United States forces are busy in Asia. This is really, really important to understand. And then you have to understand the history of communist China, how it came to be, and you have to understand the history of communist North Korea. Now, under Stalin, the Chinese communists were trained, they were surveilled, they were paid, and this was basically a Russian takeover of China, and then they claimed that China was now an independent or more independent communist state, and all this theater about Moscow and Beijing not really getting along, so this was just theater. There's probably a really large degree of Russian secret control over China, and nobody's supposed to know that, even though if you actually look at the history, that would make a lot of sense. Same goes with North Korea. The communists were trained, handpicked, financed by Russia, equipped by Russia, and so that country is basically a tool of Russia. It's a joker. You can pull that out of your sleeve and play that card, and then Russia can claim that they are not responsible for North Korea's actions. So be aware of that. Please subscribe to this channel to not miss any more videos, and visit our website, candorintel.com. You can also donate to us via Patreon.